Imagine waking up tomorrow. The air is so cold that your very first breath burns your lungs. You look around, an endless white landscape stretches to every horizon. No roads, no houses, no cities, no phone, no rescue team, just silence. You've been dropped into the Ice Age. How long do you think you'd survive? A week? 3 days? Most people wouldn't survive their very first night. Not because a mammoth trampled them, not because a pack of wolves found them, and surprisingly, not even because they froze to death. The Ice Age rarely killed people all at once. Instead, it killed them with a chain of small mistakes. One mistake made the next problem harder to solve. And every bad decision stole a little more energy, a little more time, and a little more hope. Archaeologists estimate that humans lived through the Ice Age for tens of thousands of years, surviving temperatures that could fall far below freezing, with nothing more than simple tools, animal skins, and fire. No modern equipment, no emergency supplies, no second chances. So the real question isn't whether the Ice Age was dangerous. The real question is, how did anyone survive it at all? Let's find out. Your first mistake happens almost immediately. Like most modern people, you'd assume the cold is your biggest enemy. It isn't. The real enemy is something you can't even see: heat. Or more accurately, the heat constantly escaping your body. The moment you step into the freezing air, an invisible countdown begins. Your body knows it's in danger long before you do. Almost instantly, your brain starts making sacrifices. It pulls warm blood away from your fingers and toes, sending it toward your heart, lungs, and brain instead. Those organs must stay alive even if the rest of your body suffers. That's why your fingertips are the first to go numb. Then, your toes. Then your face begins to sting as icy wind strips away the thin layer of warmth surrounding your skin. You pull your hands into your pockets. For a moment, it feels like it's working, but the Ice Age is patient. It doesn't overwhelm you with one dramatic attack. It quietly wins, minute by minute. Here's the part that surprises most people. You don't die because you're cold. You die because the cold slowly takes away your ability to solve problems. Your fingers become too stiff to tie a knot, too clumsy to sharpen a stick, too weak to strike two stones together. And without realizing it, you've entered one of nature's cruelest traps. The colder you become, the less capable you are of keeping yourself warm. Scientists call this a negative feedback loop, a survival spiral, where every failure makes the next challenge even harder. Long before hypothermia becomes fatal, you've already lost the skills needed to prevent it. And then comes another problem, one almost everyone gets wrong: water. At this point, your instincts tell you exactly what to do. Find water. That sounds easy enough. You're surrounded by snow. There must be water everywhere. This is where most people make another deadly mistake. Snow looks like water, but your body doesn't treat it that way. Imagine grabbing a handful of snow and stuffing it into your mouth. It melts eventually, but only because your own body spends precious heat turning that ice into liquid. Every mouthful steals a little more warmth from you. The colder you become, the harder it is to replace that lost heat. In other words, you're burning energy just to create a single sip of water. That's a terrible trade when every calorie could mean the difference between life and death. Now suppose you find a frozen river instead. Problem solved? Not quite. A sheet of solid ice isn't much more useful than a rock. Without tools, breaking it is exhausting. Without fire, melting it is nearly impossible. Even if you manage to collect ice, you still face the same problem. Your body has to spend energy turning it into drinkable water. Then comes another danger that's almost invisible. Cold tricks your brain. In hot weather, thirst constantly reminds you to drink. In freezing weather, that signal becomes weaker. You don't feel thirsty. But your body keeps losing water anyway. Every breath you exhale carries warm, moist air into the freezing atmosphere. Look closely at the cloud of vapor leaving your mouth. That's water. Water your body can never recover. Hour after hour, you're losing moisture with every breath. while replacing almost none of it. This is why dehydration is surprisingly common in freezing environments. Not because water doesn't exist, but because it's locked away behind icein, your own body is slowly running out of the energy needed to reach it. By now, you've lost heat. You've lost water. You've lost precious calories. And the sun is already beginning to sink. If you don't find shelter before darkness falls, none of those other problems will matter. As the daylight begins to fade, you stop thinking about water. Now you need one thing above all else: shelter. Most people imagine the Ice Age as a world of endless snowy forests. It makes sense. If there are trees, you can gather wood, build a shelter, start a fire, hide from the wind. But that picture is surprisingly inaccurate. During the last Ice Age, enormous parts of Europe, Asia, and North America were covered by a landscape archaeologists call the mammoth steppe. Instead of dense forests, there were vast open grasslands stretching for hundreds of miles. Low shrubs, frozen soil, scattered rocks, and a wind that almost never stopped. Scientists believe this was one of the largest ecosystems the Earth has ever seen. It was rich enough to support mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison, horses, reindeer, and countless other grazing animals. But for humans, it was brutally exposed. There were few trees to block the wind, very little dry wood for fuel, and caves were rare, often already occupied by bears, hyenas, or other predators. You keep walking. Every step burns calories. Those calories create body heat. The less energy you have, the colder you become. The colder you become, the harder it is to keep walking. Another cruel survival loop. Nature doesn't need monsters to kill you. It simply forces you into impossible choices. Keep moving and burn the energy you'll need later, or stop moving and let the cold take over. As the sun sinks below the horizon, the temperature drops even faster. Shadows grow longer. The wind becomes sharper. Finally, you discover a small rocky outcrop. It isn't a cave. It isn't warm. It only blocks part of the freezing wind. But tonight, it's the closest thing you'll have to a home. Then you realize something terrifying. Finding shelter was never the hardest part. Now, you have to survive the night. And without one discovery, almost every human who ever lived in the Ice Age would have died before sunrise. Fire. As darkness falls, one question matters more than anything else. Can you make fire today? That sounds almost ridiculous. Need heat? Turn on a heater. Need clean water? Boil it on a stove. Need light? Flip a switch. Modern life has made fire so ordinary that we rarely think about it. But in the Ice Age, fire wasn't a convenience. It was the difference between seeing another sunrise or becoming another frozen body on the landscape. The problem wasn't simply creating a flame. It was keeping one alive. Archaeologists have discovered ancient hearths across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, showing that prehistoric families returned to the same fireplaces again and again. Instead of starting over each day, they carefully protected glowing embers, carrying them from one camp to the next whenever possible. That makes perfect sense. Making fire with stone, tinder, and dry plant fibers wasn't easy. Doing it with freezing fingers and powerful winds was even harder. Without fire, ice stayed frozen. Meat stayed raw. Animal skins remained stiff and useless. Darkness lasted all night. Predators could move unseen. But the moment humans learned to control fire, everything began to change. Food became safer to eat. More calories could be absorbed from every meal. People could survive colder climates. Children had a better chance of reaching adulthood. Families could gather together after sunset, repairing tools, sharing stories, and passing knowledge to the next generation. Many archaeologists believe this simple orange flame became the center of prehistoric life. Long before there were villages, before there were farms, before there were kingdoms, there was a fire. And around it, humanity slowly learned how to survive. So, would you survive 1 week in the Ice Age? If you were dropped there tomorrow, with nothing but the clothes on your back? The answer is probably no. Not because you aren't intelligent, not because you aren't brave, but because survival in the Ice Age was never about courage alone. It was about thousands of small pieces of knowledge accumulated over countless generations. Which plants could be eaten? Which animal trails led to water? How to read the wind? How to build a shelter before sunset? How to keep a single ember alive through a freezing night? None of those skills were instinct. They were learned, and they were shared. That's perhaps the greatest lesson the Ice Age ever taught our species. Humans didn't become the dominant species because we were the fastest, the strongest, or the fiercest. Compared to mammoths, cave lions, or woolly rhinos, we were fragile. What made us different was our ability to cooperate, to teach, to remember, to improve. Every generation inherited the discoveries of the one before it, adding something new before passing them on again. In many ways, civilization didn't begin with cities. It began with knowledge shared around a campfire. The fact that you're alive today is proof that somewhere, thousands of generations ago, your ancestors made it through winters that should have killed them. They found food, they protected the fire, they kept their families alive. And because they survived, eventually so did you. But surviving the cold was only the beginning. Once humans learned how to stay alive, they faced an even bigger challenge: finding enough food in a world with no farms, no crops, and no supermarkets. And the answer to that question completely changed the course of human history. That's exactly what we'll explore in the next episode. What did humans eat before agriculture?